Hello, everybody. So our group 6, got a case study about an electrical engineer. And one of the main fundamental foundations of this ethical dilemma is fair treatment. And this is going to be presented by myself, Dustin, along with Sydney, Liam, and Tatsu. So just a quick overview. I'm going to be going over an introduction, giving the case foundation and the main ethical decision in question. Then Tatsu is going to talk about the IEEE ethical code for electrical engineers, and then talk about one normative ethical theory. Then Liam's going to talk about an objection, or well, two objections to this ethical theory. Then Sydney's going to wrap it up with a conclusion. So to quickly go over the case foundation here, there was a company that decided to lay off 15% of its employees. And since he was a WIP manager, Bob was tasked with laying off one of his 4 engineers in his group. And I'm just saying Bob in this case is a filler name just for easy communication. So Bob was advised to lay off one person that would be needed the least for projects over the next 2 years. If Bob was to use this method to let somebody go, he would have to lay off his engineer on the H-1B visa. And this was a bit of an issue because the H-1B visa was only issued to employees at his company. And without it, the engineer would have to return to his unstable, poverty-stricken country. Well, Human Resources told Bob that it would actually be illegal to choose an American worker over a foreign worker, since foreign workers on the H-1B visa have specialized skills that cannot be found among U.S. workers. With this in mind, after so much thought, Bob decided to lay off the engineer on the H-1B visa. And this is the main ethical decision here, whether Bob should have fired this particular engineer or not. And with that, I'll pass it on to Tatsu to talk about the IEE ethical code and a normative ethical theory.
For the ethical code, we use the IEEE Code of Ethics from the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering. And from the Code of Ethics, we chose code number 2, which was to treat all persons fairly and with respect, to not engage in harassment or discrimination, and to avoid injuring others. And under that code, it specifies to treat all persons fairly and with respect, and to not engage in discrimination based on characteristics such as race, religion, gender, disability, age, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. And so connecting the rule to the case study, the manager followed these rules when coming up with his decision on who to fire. For the ethical theory, we used deontological ethics, and deontological ethics focuses on how people have rules and duties which help distinguish acts that are right or wrong. And now focusing on the case study with deontological ethics, the manager had a duty of deciding who to lay off, whether it be the worker with the visa or an American worker. And the visa worker had specialized skills which couldn't be found by other US workers, which was why he was hired. But even with this in mind, it is illegal to fire an American worker over a foreign worker on a temporary visa. And it could be seen as discrimination where the company favors foreign workers more than US workers. So looking at the IEEE Code of Ethics, it is highlighted that discrimination is not allowed when treating people fairly. So the manager followed the Code of Ethics of fair treatment by firing the foreign worker. So under deontological ethics, the manager acted accordingly as they followed all the rules and duties set in place when coming up with his decision to lay off the foreign worker. Thus, the manager was ethical.
Okay, so here are the objections. Even though Bob, the manager, is looking out for Americans at the company, people on the H-1B visa possess specific skills that American workers do not. Therefore, he would be doing the company a disservice by firing someone on the H-1B visa. Also, you could take into account the living situation of the person on the H-1B visa would have to go back to once they were terminated at the company. So according to Ethics of Care, Bob, the manager's decision would be considered unethical due to the lack of ethical caring or consideration for the person on the H-1B visa's living situation once terminated at the country.
Thanks, Liam. And so for our conclusion, in order to save money, the company needed to lay off 15% of its employees. The manager, Bob, was given no choice but to lay off their engineer because he was on an H-1B visa. Under deontological ethics, the moral agent followed the rules and duties to come to a formal conclusion of firing the visa worker. So the decision was ethical. And by firing the foreign worker, the company is at a disadvantage because workers on H-1B visa carry skills that Americans do not have. And under ethics of care, although they were following the law, it is unfair to lay off someone just because they are on H-1B visa, especially because of their living situation. So the decision was unethical. And here's our contribution. Dustin did the introduction. Tatsu did the ethical theory and ethical code. Liam did the objection, and Sydney did the conclusion. And here are our references.